What's going on, Packers fans? Aaron Nagler here with Cheesehead TV, joined as always after a win or a loss. It's Mr. Andy Herman of the Pack a Day podcast. Andy, how are you doing on this decidedly not Victory Monday?
Yeah, I missed your tweet every Monday where it's like, winning, man, it's way better than losing.
Better than losing? Yeah,
I
can't
missed
tweet that
day.
out when we
No.
lose. It's not appropriate, as some might say. I think, the book on this game is already pretty much put to bed less than 24 hours after it occurred, but we need to talk about it. Clearly, the Packers, in a bit of a measuring stick game, that's what I've been calling it, certainly didn't seem to measure up to a very good, if not the best team in the league at the moment in the Detroit Lions. I know we'll talk about self-inflicted wounds. We'll talk about the consistency and the efficiency of the Lions. Pulling back 30,000-foot view, I know you've been going over the tape. What's your initial takeaway from an embarrassing loss, to put it not too fine a point on, for the Packers yesterday?
Yeah, it's kind of some of the same talking points, of course. I think the thing that's really, I don't know if disheartening is the right word, but just disappointing still is like, these are two of your biggest games of the year in Minnesota and Detroit at home, divisional games. Aaron, as well as anyone, they spend a disproportionate amount of time preparing specifically for these opponents. Every coach that is basically every year going into, we got to win our division. That gets you a playoff berth. That gets you a home game in the first round of the playoffs. That is a huge thing that every coach preaches. And to go and have two games where you're down 28-0, excuse me, down 28-0 and then down 24-3 in these two games and not even have it be competitive to begin with and have to just sort of fight and claw your way back to even make it somewhat respectable at the end, to the point where I think Minnesota felt Green Bay's presence a little bit by the end of that game, but Detroit was never bothered at all. And again, both games at home. I understand the Love injury and some of the other injuries that you've had, but we know injuries are not an excuse in this league. I'm sure Detroit would have loved to have Aiden Hutchinson. I'm sure they would have loved for Brian Branch not to get ejected, and they found a way through it, and Green Bay did not. And that, I think, is the thing that's really troubling-ish to me, is that they kind of just went through the motions in these games and were not competitive.
Yeah, I think that last part is the most kind of disconcerting, right? Where you want to think of yourself as in that top tier, top echelon part of the league. And certainly we've talked a lot this year about you never apologize for winning, right?
Yeah.
You certainly want to pile up as many victories as you can, especially early in the season. Things are only going to get tougher after the bye week when it comes to the schedule. But you look at this game and you see the stats, and certainly in the flow of the game, the Packers were able to move the ball, but they continuously shot themselves in the foot pre-snap oftentimes, but sometimes after in the play itself. And there's no way that you can overcome that again and again and again against, again, one of the best teams in the league. But it's very clear that the talent kind of divide is not that great.
No.
That's a team that the Packers can go toe-to-toe with if they play a clean game. And I think the most disheartening part of it is the Lions did. They played a clean game in their first game, as often stated in that broadcast and online leading up and into the game. Their first game outdoors the entire year in a rainstorm. And the Packers look like a team that didn't practice outside all week, even though they did. Don't play in the elements, even though they do.
Yep.
And to me, that speaks to coaching, culture, and things that are really hard to quantify. But when we continuously see this kind of thread with Matt LaFleur's teams, where against this opponent specifically, it just seems like Dan Campbell and his staff are a cut above LaFleur's and his.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I also think they're maybe a year or two ahead on that maturity curve. I mean, Detroit kind of started this movement and building, this team a couple of years kind of before Green Bay did. And Detroit had to go through a lot of these, sort of learning moments in those couple of years with Dan Campbell to begin with. They certainly did in the playoffs again last year when they lost to San Francisco, just like Green Bay did. And you can just tell that they're a little bit more mature in their journey as to, being a complete football team than where Green Bay is right now. And I don't think that again is something that Green Bay can't overcome. I think they're going to have another opportunity to face them in Detroit, where they obviously beat them in Detroit last year, and will give them, I think, a much better game hopefully this next time around. But there is this difficult aspect of, who do you want to specifically place blame on for the continued issues with the pre-snap penalties, the drops? Because I think the hard part for me is it's such an easy just a scapegoat. Just it's Matt LaFleur. Matt LaFleur is the it's all
Right.
Matt's fault or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, what's difficult is it's not like it's one player. Over Rasheed Walker's had is injury or issues with penalties, right? With some holds and some false starts. He did not, if I remember correctly, have
Right.
one in this
Yesterday,
game.
no.
Like, Keyshawn had two in this game, the personal foul and then a holding penalty later. But like, it's not like it's the same guy in the same penalties and the same person dropping the passes. It was like almost like a Russian roulette of like who's going to be the guy on this play
Right.
to screw something up, and it was just kind of like the whack-a-mole where it's like somebody different on every single play. And I think that's the hard part. And when we hear all the time about doing your 111th or that it's the ultimate team game, those are the sort of things that can derail you. It's a false start by Sean Ryan on one play, a drop by Dontavian Wicks on the next, a pick by Jordan on the following, a missed field goal on the following. Like, you just go through and all of a sudden where you had all this yardage and all these positive plays on every single drive. It went through like the 8 first drives. You had some play, whether a drop, a penalty or whatever, that derailed you every single drive until the final one. They didn't have anything derail them. They scored 8 points on the play. Like, it was just so very evidently clear that they could move the ball as much as they wanted to against the team when they weren't shooting themselves in the foot. And again, I think that's the hard part is like, where exactly do you assess blame? But I guess it does have to ultimately roll back to the head coach in some capacity.
Well, it was hard to watch, and it reminded me, it felt like we were back in week 1 as far as we've got a quarterback who's clearly not 100%. And for the first time, Matt LaFleur admitted as much in the post-game presser, which I thought was interesting. But, he's fighting through whatever he's got to fight through. And sure, some of those passes are not pinpoint accurate, but they're certainly catchable more often than not, especially the third down drops are what really killed them early on. Make a play for your quarterback.
Yeah.
Guy who is out there battling, trying to kind of lead by example, fighting through injury, etc. And time and again, whether it is Wicks and even Tucker Kraft got in on the act. I mean, guys who, even normally, Dobbs, pretty sure-handed, he had a bad drop on that slant play early. Those are the plays where, again, felt like week 1 where I get it's not perfect, but make a play for your quarterback. And down the stretch, kind of back half of the second half, they started to, but by then it was too little too late. To me, that is a number one as far as if this team is going to overcome its youth and overcome its pre-snap stuff, because that's mental, that's focus, what have you, they can't afford the physical mistakes like that in the flow of the game, in the actual game action, because they're too talented to put up with that nonsense. It's very apparent that this is a team that can't get out of its own way, but unless it does, they're not going to get where they want to go this season.
And, we talk about it all the time. Football is an imperfect game, but can you find a way to pick up your guy when maybe things aren't quite as perfect? And the throw to Wicks is behind him. Can Wicks still catch that? He should probably every single time. Like the throw behind Brooks is behind him. Should he catch that? Yeah, he very much should catch that. It's like, it's not perfect, but it's workable, and find a way to make it work and make that play and kind of pick your guy up every once in a while. And it goes in all directions. Like on the play where, the pick six, where you have that play. Right. On that play, if it's blocked up better, Jaden Reed's wide open down the field. Yep. Now, Jordan Morgan, or maybe, doesn't necessarily pick it up.
Morgan doesn't quite hold it long enough.
Yes,
Morgan's the one who lets it leak there a little bit.
It's not a brutal play by Morgan, but it's one that maybe could have done a little bit better. But just because there's a pressure there, can Jordan just find a way to get rid of the ball? So instead of, we didn't hit the big play down the field, but we're not going to have it extrapolate into a pick six where the other team's getting 7 points on the play. Like, pick up your teammate where it's not always going to be perfect, and figure out a way to just sort of get through that play and live to see another play. And it's from all avenues and all players. And they just got to figure out a way. Well, we talk about complementary football from offense to defense to special teams, but even within the same offense, if you're getting a ball that is remotely catchable, find a way to go and make that play, regardless of whether it's a perfect pass or not. And I think that's what Green Bay's not done a good enough job, is kind of picking their brother up when need be.
Well, I can hear probably howls of derision and anger as we speak here, talking about guys needing to help their quarterback. And then you just mentioned it, the pick six, of which, I mean, that is a brutal decision. It is an awful moment. It is a boneheaded decision. And the entire game swings on that play. Just under a minute. I understand, like you said, they're trying to hit Reed deep. It's not blocked up well. Man, throw it away. And it was funny to hear, going back, because obviously I don't listen to the commentary live, but going back and rewatching the broadcast, there's a play later in the game where Love holds the ball forever, gets flushed out to his right, and then you hear Brady on the commentary, throw it away, throw it away, throw it away. It's like at some point, this has got to get drilled into Jordan's head. And I've talked a lot about how he's young and he's going to be making mistakes and he's got to learn from them. And he referenced, having made too many of these decisions already, and heading into week 10, the eerie similarity of the pick six in LA. Now you go yesterday, that horrible decision in pick six against a team that, again, the margin for error is so razor thin. You cannot give them, forget scores, opportunities. And to see him, I guess, somewhat, it felt like, I don't know, I'd love to get your take on this. Post game, it's the first time I really thought it affected him. When we talk a lot about him being so kind of cool, calm, and collected and able to move past whatever mistakes and move on to the next play, that's the first time it really felt like he was a bit more introspective about, I'm really starting to hurt the team and I've got to figure this out. I've got to learn from these mistakes. And I don't know what the key is there. Obviously, he's got coaches. He's got Tom Clements in his ear undoubtedly after every series, etc. But at some point, there's got to be a drill down there and there's got to be a breakthrough, or it's going to be a lost season, in the sense that if you're throwing away possessions and or games each and every week, that's it. Wrap it up, because you're not going anywhere with that continuous kind of mistake laden play from your franchise guy.
Yeah, a few things on this. I think, first of all, you're 100% right. I think it definitely, he was very aware of it. He was affected by it. He understood the magnitude of that play and that decision in that game. And I think he knows very much that he has to clean it up and be better. So you could tell that even just in his, in the presser afterwards, that he's very aware of it. I think the second thing is, we get right that he wants to be able to make some of these big time plays. And sometimes it very much helps Green Bay, some of the things that he's able to do. I think what you have to do, though, and I know this is difficult in real time, and I don't know if it's something that Jordan just needs to kind of look at pre-play, like right, but as he's going through all the other stuff and the checks and everything, of like, what's the risk analysis on that particular play, and just kind of remember that as the play goes on. The Jacobs pick six is such a great example. If he completes that to Jacobs, it arguably is a awful play, because he's going to get tackled right away. Yep. And the clock's going to run.
There's literally a linebacker right next to Jacobs.
Right there. Like, honestly, like an incompletion there is actually better than even if you complete that out to Jacobs. Mm-hmm. So like, just the risk analysis of like, all right, what is it that I'm going to potentially gain by, connecting on this, versus what could potentially go wrong with all these people in this one area and me try to check it down in this situation. Like, let's live to see another play. It's not a third down play. It's not a fourth down play. The game's not on the line. Like, I think that's where you have to make that decision of, there's just not enough good things that can happen here. I got to get rid of this thing. And I think later in the game too, when he's holding it, there has to become a point where that clock goes off in your head and saying like, we're well past the point in time where like good things are going to happen anymore. Like there's a point in time where, once you reach a certain point and there's just not a play there, much more bad things are going to happen than good things are going to happen. Throw the ball away, get rid of it again, unless it's a fourth down, have to have it moment where you got to throw it up, something like that. And even going back to the Dontavian Wicks play against the Vikings, where he throws that one up, that's a first down play. Like, those are the situations, like, you just have to figure out a way to live and see another down. So I think that's where he has to find that line of, is this a situation where we have to have it? Or is this a situation where an incompletion is totally fine and completely understandable? And those are the situations he's got to make those decisions in. And I think you could feel it from Matt LaFleur in the presser, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this as well, but you could feel it in the fact that he's very clear that he wants to be able to give Jordan that autonomy to go out and make those plays, because of how special of an asset that can be for Green Bay as well. And you don't want to neuter that out of him. You don't want him to get into those opportunities and all of a sudden be like, oh, I don't know, I don't want to do anything, and start seeing ghosts, or just being like, any play could become a turnover. So there's definitely a fine line there, and they have to find it. And that's going to be, I think, really a defining point of this second half of the season for Jordan and this offense.
It was fascinating to watch LaFleur at the podium yesterday after the game and be asked repeatedly about Jordan's decision-making and what they can do, etc. And I did love all of the usual outlets harping on the quote of those questions, or that line of questioning, being annoying. Which, from Matt's point of view, I get it. I understand it. Yep. It is annoying. Hell, it's annoying to listen to. I can't imagine having to answer those questions repeatedly. But I will say this. The part I found most interesting about LaFleur's answers after the game, and I'd love to get your take on this, when he, we mentioned it before, admitted Jordan Love is fighting through things as far as he is playing injured. He is playing not one close to 100%.
Yeah.
So at what point do we have the conversation? Well, then let's sit him down
Yeah.
until he's right. I get you paid him the money you paid him. I get he's your franchise guy. You want players to want to play, which Jordan absolutely does. And I applaud that. No question about it. But does he give you the best chance to win when he's continuously making these mistakes while trying to compensate and overcome one, if not two, different injuries? I know they're never going to be specific about what exactly is ailing him, whether it's the groin, the knee, what have you, but it's very clear he's laboring and he is fighting through it. So sit him down. You've got a quarterback you've already seen can get you through games and help you win those games. Again, I don't begrudge Jordan the desire to get out there and play. I understand Matt wanting his starter out there to be able to utilize the entire offense.
Yeah.
I get all of that. But at some point, and maybe the bye week makes all of this moot, but I gotta suspect this is not the kind of thing that's just going to up and vanish in a week. There's got to be at some point a conversation of, are we doing more harm than good? And is he developing bad habits because he's trying to compensate and fight through these things? To me, that's a conversation that needs to be had if it's not already being had inside 1265.
So yeah, and I love the last part of like, are you developing bad habits? Because I think that is definitely one that you
That's
have
the
to
worry,
consider.
right?
Yeah, I think that's one. I think, you go into a game, right? I think, when you're going into this game with Jordan, feeling like you've got a game plan set where you're going to run the football, be multiple, be dynamic, and figure out ways to get the ball out on the field and score points. And you've got a whole game plan set up for it. And you go down the field on the very first drive, you move it beautifully, and you self-destruct with drops and penalties at the end.
Right.
You have to settle for a field goal. Detroit goes down, immediately gets a touchdown. And then, you just have sort of more and more situations. You have the drop on third down by Wicks, and you've got the eventual drop in the end zone by Wicks or whatever. But like up in the first half, you're moving the ball well. You feel like you're going to be able to run your offense, and
Right.
then all of a sudden, in the blink of an eye, it's 10-3. You throw the pick six. It's 17-3. That final drive is like a 30-second drive where you don't have enough time to do anything anyway. Then they get the ball, and now it's 24-3.
Now it's 24-3.
And now you're
Yep.
just now all of a sudden, all of your beautiful game plan stuff that you had in there for Jordan is gone. It's nuked. You can't use Jacobs in the same way. You've got to spread out. You're giving Detroit advantageous situations to try to get after him and try to take away the football. And then I think at that point, you're also like, all right, well, do we want to bring like the beauty of what's worked with Malik is that you've been in situations where at worst they were down 4 against Jacksonville. Right. And like the other ones, like they were basically winning the entirety of the time. The whole world is your oyster. You can run anything at any moment. You can do the read options and whatever you want to do. Right. Do you want to bring in Malik when you're down 21 and have to throw 30 times the rest of the game? I don't know that that's necessarily the situation you want to do either. So I think you go into it feeling we've got a great game plan for Jordan and can figure out a way to get him through this and make good decisions and run the football. And then once you get punched in the face and that all goes out the window, now you're not in a great situation to bring in your backup anyway. So it's like, it's just a darned if you do, darned if you don't sort of thing. I thought Jordan was mobile enough, able to protect himself enough, and able to hit throws all over the field enough to play in this game. I just didn't think Jordan had a great game. I think he needed to be better. I think his teammates needed to be better around him. And at the end of the day, they just did not play the brand of football that they needed to play to beat the Lions.
Yeah, I never thought like, okay, they have to turn to Malik in this game. That's for sure. But
yeah,
just playing Jordan, starting Jordan when he's, by their own admittance, playing injured. And this guy has not been right since week 1. Don't forget, even before he gets hurt on that final play or close to the final play down in Brazil, there's shots of him having his legs worked on. He's dealing with leg issues in game 1 of this season.
Yeah.
There hasn't been a game this year where he's been right. So to me, that's where I get to sit him down. Let him get right. You've invested how much in this player? He is the face of your franchise. Again, I don't begrudge the idea of wanting to get out there and wanting to play and wanting him to play. But at some point, you have to protect the player, protect your investment. I don't know. We'll see. They'll come out of the bye week and they'll beat the Bears and everything will be happy go lucky and everyone will forget all about it probably. But it's just
Fingers
something to
crossed.
me that it's just something to me that it just feels they're really kind of fighting themselves on this one. It feels like anyway.
And it's
Let's
not a situation where it's Sean Clifford or something where you're just
right.
completely screwed, right? Like,
That's the thing. You finally have this comfort in Malik Willis, where you have a path to victory when he's in there. It's not like bringing in Brett Hundley back in the day.
yeah,
It's you have a real opportunity to win games with Malik Willis as your quarterback that you never had previously. So that's why, to me, it makes sense to have the conversation.
yeah,
That's all.
I understand it.
That's all I'm saying. Um, Flipping it over to the defensive side of the ball, I was fascinated to watch. I guess, and this really kind of got cemented rewatching it. Jeff Halfley figuring out Ben Johnson in real time. Like there was so much kind of, I won't say tepid, but there was so much kind of, all right, I'm going to see how he's operating first. And
Yeah.
then I'm going to start reacting and trying to do a few things pass rush wise, etc. And I kind of understood it. But you also saw in Johnson and the Lions a team and a play caller operating at the highest level, really efficient stuff, manufacturing really easy throws and gains for Goff.
Yep.
Overall, I thought, Halfley, for the most part, acquitted himself just fine, but it was clear who had the experience here and who's, in their ninth game as an NFL coordinator. I thought, Halfley did what he could, a bit hamstrung given the secondary situation with the injuries. Uh, but overall, again, I thought as the game went on, I thought Halfley acquitted himself pretty well.
I'm going to be totally honest. I have no idea how to judge the defense in this game. So they give up the
Right.
opening touchdown. Detroit goes right down there, immediately scores a touchdown. Not a ton of resistance. In most cases and in most situations, teams are going to kick the field goal on 4th and 5. They're not even
Right.
probably going to line up to try to, because even if you get somebody to jump off sides, unless you get a free play or something, like it's still 4th and 3. You're still normally like, I don't know. It was just a weird set of circumstances, but Detroit's weird. They're going to throw some bizarre stuff at you. And then
Right.
they get the one-on-one, they throw it to EQ and he goes up and gets it and makes a phenomenal play. But like they go down and score the touchdown right away. Then they force a punt on that following drive. Then it's the field goal drive and the touchdown drive to start the second half. So in their first 4 times when the game was sort of kind of in the balance is what I would kind of define it as. Touchdown, punt, field goal, touchdown. So they score in 3 of the 4 drives, including 17 points overall. And then you got to this point where it felt like Detroit was on, I don't want to say cruise control, but like, let's just not do anything stupid. Sort of like, let's kind of hand the ball off, take easy throws. We're not going to really have our foot fully on the gas. And they go punt, punt, punt. And then Green Bay gets within 10. They got to find a way to get the ball back. And Detroit just is like, we're just going to milk the clock out the remainder of the way. And Green Bay could not get that final stop to get the ball back anyway. Not that it would have mattered anyway. They were down by 10. They were going to need an onside kick or whatever. But like they still could not get off the field at that point. So I didn't see of anything that I'm like, this was really impressive or great from the defense. I also didn't feel like the defense was ever really put in a situation where they had the lead or they could dictate because the offense just wasn't doing anything. The offense in and of itself, if the defense didn't play a snap in the first 3 quarters, the offense was losing by a point after 3 quarters. They were down 7-6 based on the pick 6 alone. So, the defense was not set up for success. I thought they managed that game about as well as they possibly could. But in some key drives, like the start of the second half, you knew like you just really could not allow points on that. You had to get the ball back, and Detroit just goes right down and scores a touchdown. So I don't know. This is to me like not on the defense even remotely. I'm like not even concerned about the defense on this game. I also don't know that I can point to anything that the defense is like, yep, this was great. I feel super wonderful about it. But it was just kind of like, again, I don't know how to evaluate in this one. I don't know. Maybe I hope you have a better of an eval than maybe I do.
No,
On this one.
I'm right there with you. Just the sense that I got throughout the proceedings were that, like I said, I thought Halfley was very much trying to see what Johnson was doing. And, one of those kind of 3 and outs, punt series, etc. in the second half was when Johnson tried his patented, okay, now I'm going to throw some, trick plays at you.
Razzle
And
dazzle.
thank goodness for Kingsley and Igbare shutting that down and really put him behind the sticks. And then Nixon gets the hit on the quarterback and they're punting. But for the most part, yeah, I agree with you. It was felt like the Lions had it whenever they needed it, right? There wasn't a moment. Although I will quibble with that penalty on Nixon on the quote hold. I thought that was a bit ludicrous. Gave him
Yeah.
a first down. Again, Detroit doesn't need the help, but be that as it may, the individual kind of parts were interesting, especially Preston Smith giving way to not Kingsley Nabari, giving way to Lucas Van Ness for really the first time as far as snap counts go. And I'm not saying, like, I know we're right up against the trade deadline. There's been some kind of smoke around Preston's name. I don't think it's about that, but it is about getting your younger developing players on the field finally. Even though I don't think Van Ness did very much, it
No.
was nice to see him get a little bit more run. So hopefully he does eventually round into shape as a player. I also thought we saw Eric Wilson kind of crash back down to earth as far as really, I thought they took advantage of him in a lot of different ways. And look, you had Bullard, I thought, kind of bounced back a bit from a poor showing down in Jacksonville. But overall, I'm with you. I think Johnson was a step ahead most of the game, did a really nice job of using kind of some of their tendencies and aggressiveness against them. Uh, but for the most part, yeah, they didn't really need to do much outside of manufacture. Like I said, some pretty simple, quote unquote, as simple as it can be in the NFL, some simple reads and throws for Goff to get easy yardage, get the ball out of his hands quickly. But ultimately, man, you look at Amon-Ra St. Brown, the fact that they can flash that stat up there where he's hit him 30 times in a row or whatever it is. I mean, I don't even call it a luxury. What an amazing development
He's
for
unreal.
a
Yeah.
team that, like, just a short few years ago, to your point, when they started turning it around, so to speak, they had lost like what 6 in a row or whatever it was, and they looked like they were headed to another dismal season. But they have developed that over time, and that's kind of what I kept coming back to kind of wrap this around to the start of our conversation here. It's like that is a team and a program that is in a different spot than the Packers, and I know it doesn't feel like that because LaFleur's been in town since 2019, but this group and core
Yeah.
has kind of just started last year.
Yep.
So that's what I thought was the major kind of difference on both sides of the ball for these teams is the fact that, yeah, you've got coordinators and a way of working and a program that is a little more deep rooted with its players than it is so far in Green Bay.
Just to go back to, and I agree with all that. I just to go back to Amon-Ra St. Brown for a minute. Like, I don't think he gets remotely, and I know like most people are aware of him and how good he is. Like that guy is a superstar. Like that to me is a superstar. He's as good as it gets in this league. I don't think he gets put in that echelon. Like what he does week in and week out, and when like in those have to have it moments, like a 4th and goal on the 3-yard line, and you're just going to throw him a jump ball and he's going to go get it. He is as money as it gets. And I know, we don't really like to, give credit to the other teams from time to time or whatever, but like, man, does he deserve the credit? He's phenomenal. And yeah, I think Detroit just a half step ahead of where Green Bay is at right now. And I think Green Bay can make up that gap. I'm really, really excited for the second half of the season for Green Bay and that matchup in Detroit, just like last year, and to see if Green Bay can bounce back. I'm sure those, Green Bay sucks t-shirts maybe hopefully resonate a little bit more and they go into Detroit and maybe try to take back some mojo in that series. But right now, Detroit's got it. Like they're the kings of the North. Green Bay is not. And if Green Bay wants to switch that narrative around, they'll have an opportunity later in this year when they go to Detroit.
I mean, that's the point I repeatedly come back to watching this game is that, they don't give trophies for games won in early November. And as hard as it was to watch and as tough as it is to rewatch and to go into a bye week with that as your kind of aftertaste of the last game before, it's hard, man. As a Packers fan, it's really tough. I get that. But there is so much season left. There's so much further to go. And this is a team that at this point last year was not very good. I think this is an inconsistent team this year. They have to find their consistency. They have to find a way to be a lot more efficient, etc. But man, you can see the talent. It is, I think, way ahead of where it was last year, despite getting clobbered on national television yesterday. I'm excited for the second half of the season, but I do think the bye week is coming at a very good time.
I was literally, you took the words right out of my mouth. This is the perfect, it feels like they just need like that reset button, right? Like, let's just let's restart this thing. You've sort of built yourself this nice little, we're 6-3. It's not in panic mode. You don't need to do a run the table. You don't need to have like 1 or 2 losses only the rest of the year. You've bought yourself a little bit of cushion here, but it does feel like they're almost in need of a little bit of a, let's kind of redo this and restart this over. And I think if they can do that, again, start building some rhythm, some good habits, I think they can end up with a very similar end of the year as they did last year, where they got hot at the right time and hopefully started playing their best football at the right time. I'm totally fine with this team not playing their best football in September, October, November. We've seen teams like that in the past. It usually doesn't end very well. I want a team that's playing its best football in December, January, and hopefully February. And this team will have the opportunity to do that, but they definitely have work ahead of them if they want to get to that point.
Totally agree. Andy, we're obviously recording this the day before the trade deadline. Real quick before we go, do you see the Packers making a move?
I'm going to say no, just because we've been here before. I'll put it at about 25%. I think there's a 25% chance Green Bay makes a move.
25 whole
percent.
spicy, right? Look at you.
A whole 25.
All right.
I know. So I'll say 25% chance. It wouldn't shock me if they made some sort of small incremental move, like a fifth or sixth round pick for a rotational edge rusher, another corner, just to get a little bit of additional depth or something like that. That wouldn't stun me. If it was like some major move that like you and I are talking next week and be like, can you believe they did that? I don't see happening, but shocking, right? Some small Ogbo Okoronkwo move from Cleveland or something crazy. That's the most Green Bay thing ever. So that I'll say there's a chance that they do something like that.
Yeah, it's so funny you say that, because I want to sit here and say, no way, come on, every year with this. But if there's been a season where Brian has repeatedly surprised me, it's been this year. So it's all on the table. If he pulled off the biggest trade of the year, I'm not going to blink, because gosh knows, I've thought he was going to operate in one way, and he has almost always gone the other way this year. So who knows?
Let me ask you, if I told you that Green Bay made a significant move, what position do you think it would be for?
Edge rusher, if there is one available, but I don't know what that constitutes significant. I mean, they're not going and getting Zadarius Smith. So I don't know who would be on offer in that regard. I know the fans out there, I've repeatedly heard the Myles Garrett's and Max Crosby's of the world. We know that's not happening. So outside of that, I don't know what people expect. I don't think there's some huge swing to be had here. But again, if it happens, I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh my God, I'm shocked totally. Because like I said, Brian's been a bit different this season, a bit more ruthless, a bit more aggressive. So we'll see. 24 hours and we'll find out.
25%.
Andy, 25%. That feels high, but I like it. Andy, I really appreciate the time as always. Make sure you check out Pack a Day podcast and everything Andy does covering the team. Andy, thanks so much for the time, man.
We'll talk soon. Thanks, Aaron.